Hello and welcome to another session with Learn IT Courses Online. My name is Bashir Fadl, and I'd like to welcome you to today's session. Today, we continue our journey into the career of a business analyst. As a business analyst, one of the core job descriptions is requirement gathering. In some cases, you might have worked at that position for a long time and it's in the same field. So let's say we're building software for a law firm. Chances are that I have a general understanding of what they're looking for, and there's certain modifications here and there, but you understand the concepts of what they need. But suppose you just started working at a law firm for the first time and you're building a software. How do you get that information? How do you get the requirements? How do we ask the right questions? So today what we're going to learn are requirement gathering techniques. Techniques describe how tasks are performed under specific circumstances. A task may have none or one or more related techniques. A technique should be related to at least one task. So the following are some of the well-known requirement gathering techniques that are going to make you very successful as a business analyst. The first one is brainstorming. Brainstorming is used in requirement gathering to get as many ideas as possible from a group of people, generally used to identify possible solutions to problems and clarify details of opportunities. Number two, document analysis. Reviewing the documentation of an existing system can help when creating as-is process document, as well as driving gap analysis for scoping of migration projects. In an ideal world, we would even be reviewing the requirements that drove creation of the existing system. Next, focus group. A focus group is a gathering of people who are representative of the users or customers of a product to get feedback. The feedback can be gathered about needs, opportunities, problems to identify requirements, or can be gathered to validate and refine already elicited requirements and gathered. Next is interface analysis. Interfaces for software can be human or machine. Integration with external systems and devices is just another interface. User-centric design approaches are very effective at making sure that we create usable software. Next, interview. Interviews of stakeholders and users are critical to creating the great software. Without understanding the goals and expectations of the users and stakeholders, we are very unlikely to satisfy them. We also have to recognize the perspective of each interviewee so that we can properly weigh and address their inputs. Next, observation. By observing users, an analyst can identify a process flow, steps, pain points, and opportunities for improvement. Observations can be passive or active, asking questions while observing. Passive observation is better for getting feedback on a prototype to refine requirements, whether active observation is more effective at getting an understanding of an existing business process. Either approach can be used. Next is prototyping. Prototyping is a relatively modern technique for gathering requirements. In this approach, you gather preliminary requirements that use to build an initial version of the solution, a prototype. You show this to the client, who then gives you additional requirements. And of course, you can change the application and cycle around the client again. This repetitive process continues until the process or the product meets the critical mass of business needs or for an agreed number of iterations and repetitions. Next, requirement workshops. Workshops can be very effective for gathering requirements. More structured than a brainstorming session, involved parties collaborate to document requirements. One way to capture the collaboration is with the creation of domain model artifacts, such as static diagrams, activity diagrams. A workshop will be more effective with 2 analysts than with 1. Next is reverse engineering. When a migration project does not have access to sufficient documentation of the existing system, reverse engineering will identify what the system does. It will not identify what the system should do and will not identify when the system does wrong things. Finally, survey and questionnaires. When collecting information from many people, too many to interview with budget and time constraints, a survey or questionnaire can be used. The survey can force users to select from choices, rate something, agree, strongly disagree, for instance, or have open-ended questions allowing free-form responses. Survey design is something that is important. So now we move to functional requirements documents. The functional requirements document, FRD, is a formal statement of an application functional requirements. It serves the same purpose as a contract. Here, the developer agrees to provide the capability specified. The client agrees to find the product satisfactory if it provides the capability specified in the FRD. Functional requirements capture the intended behavior of the system. This behavior may be expressed as services, tasks, or functions the system is required to perform. The document should be tailored to fit a particular project's need. They define things such as system calculations, data manipulations and processing, user interfaces, and interaction with the application. The functional requirements document, FRD, has the following characteristics. Number one, it demonstrates that the application provides value in terms of the business objectives and business processes in the next few years. Number two, it contains a complete set of requirements for the application, leaving no room for anyone to assume anything which is not stated in the FRD. Number three, it is solution independent. The FRD is a statement of what the application is to do, not how it works. Next, the functional requirements should include the following. The functional requirements should include, number one, description of data to be entered into the system, description of operations performed by each screen, description of workflows performed by the system, description of system reports or other outputs, who can enter the data into the system, how the system meets applicable regulatory requirements, and as such, the functional specification is designed to be read by a general audience. Readers should understand the system, but no technical knowledge should be required to understand this document. So now let's go a step deeper to find what are the functional requirements deliverables. A business requirement document, a BRD, consists of functional requirements. And to explain that, functional requirements basically is a document containing detailed requirements for the system being developed. These are requirements that define the functional feature and capabilities that the system must process. Number two, business process model. A model of the current state of the process as is model, or a concept of what the process should become. Number three, system context diagram. A context diagram shows the system boundaries, external and internal entities that interact with the system, and the relevant data flows between the external and internal entities. Number four, flow diagrams, as is or to be. Diagrams graphically depict the sequence of operations or the movement of data from a business process. One or more flow diagrams are included depending on the complexity of the model. Next is the business rules and data requirements. Business rules define or constrain some aspects of the business and are used to define data constraints, default values, value ranges, cardinality, data types, calculations, exceptions, required element, and the relational integrity of the data. Next, data models, such as entity relationship diagrams, entity descriptions, and class diagrams. Next is the conceptual model, high-level display of different entities for a business function and how they relate to one another. Next, logical model, which illustrates the specific entities, attributes, and relationships involved in a business function and represents all the definitions, characteristics, and relationships of data in a business, technical, or conceptual environment. Next is the data dictionary and glossary, a collection of detailed information on the data element, fields, tables, and other entities that compromise the data model underlining a database or similar data management system. Next, stakeholder map. This identifies all stakeholders who are affected by the proposed change and their influence authority level for requirements. This document is developed in the organization phase of the project management methodology, PMM, and is owned by the project manager, but needs to be updated by the project team as new change stakeholders are identified throughout the process. And finally, requirements traceability matrix, which is a table that illustrates logical links between individual functional requirements and other types of system artifacts, including other functional requirements, use cases, user stories, architecture and design elements, code modules, test cases, and business rules. Now we move to SRS, Software Requirements Specifications. A software requirement specification, SRS, is basically a document which is used as a communication medium between the customers. A software requirement specification in its most basic form is a formal document used in communicating software requirements between the customers and the developer. An SRS document concentrates on what needs to be done and carefully avoids the solution, how to do. It serves as a contract between the development team and the customer. The requirements at this stage is written using end user terminology. If necessary, later a formal requirement specification will be developed from it. SRS is a complete description of the behavior of a system to be developed and may include a set of use cases that describes the interactions the user will have with the software. So now what's the purpose of the SSRS? The purpose of SRS is a communication tool basically between customer, client, business analyst, system developer, maintenance team. It can also act as a contract between the purchaser and the supplier. It will give firm foundation for the design phase, supports project management and control, helps in controlling and evolution of system. A software requirement specification should be complete, consistent, traceable, unambiguous, and verifiable. That is why the following should be addressed in the system specification. Number one, define the functions of the system, define the hardware software function partitioning, define the performance and specification, define the hardware and software performance partitioning, define safety requirements, define the user interface, that is the user manual, provide installation drawings instructions, and finally, software requirement specification template. One part that's always important in all documentation is having document revision, history, and approval included within our documentation. As you can see in the image, we have a revision history that includes dates and description, authors and comments, and then the different revisions that go in there. And then the document approval, basically the signature, name, and title and date of that agreement and approval. So thank you for joining us for another session in the path of the career of a business analyst.